Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Art Museum of New Bedford. This is the 15th meeting of the New Bedford Fine Arts Club. My name is Brendan Curie, and I'm the Director of Audience for the New Bedford Light. We've been holding these meetings for more than 2 years, and once again, we have quite a batch of talented artists, as well as an amazing featured artist, Erik Durant, a brilliant sculpturist. Each one of the artists who will speak today has a unique journey, and we'll get to hear how they discover their passion for the arts, what inspires them creatively, and their process for turning a simple idea into an incredible work of art. And I'm sure we'll all leave inspired and energized. But first, a little bit about the New Bedford Light. We are a free, non-profit, non-partisan online news outlet serving the readers of Greater New Bedford with vital information about our local community. Our mission is to expose, examine, educate, and engage. While we spend much of our time informing readers about their options in the upcoming election, digging into the city's housing crunch, exploring the indignities and solutions for the ongoing addiction crisis, shedding light on the inner workings of the waterfront, or uncovering what led to the demise of the Star Store, we also make a point to celebrate the cultural richness that makes New Bedford such a unique place. And that's what brings us here to the New Bedford Light Fine Arts Club. We were inspired by the Detroit Fine Arts Breakfast Club to offer a place for artists to gather, share their experiences, and give us a peek into their process. And of course, sell some art. That's important. Almost everything you see tonight is for sale. There's a couple items that aren't going to be noted in your program. You can take home almost anything that stirs your spirit. Simply talk to the artist after the presentation or use their contact information from the program. And we hope you stick around after the presentations for the afterglow. It's your chance to talk to the artist one-on-one. So now let's welcome our hosts, who are both extremely talented artists in their own right. Scott Bishop is a musician, songwriter, and sound sculptor creating music under the name Scapegoat. His latest release is Basementscapes Volume 2, The River of Time Runs Through Us All, a set of 4 ambient pieces created for the Take Me to the River exhibition that ran during this August at the Ignition Space in Fall River. The next Scapegoat band show will be at the New Beige Bash Festival at Gallery X on Saturday, November 23rd. And the next entry in his curated music series, Unexpected Music, happens tomorrow night at 6 p.m. at Interwoven, featuring Voodoo Sister and Miles Goulart. In addition to his music work, Scott is a contributor to the In Focus podcast for the Artist Index. He has a BA in illustration from the Savannah College of Art and Design, and he lives in New Bedford with his wife and 2 daughters. Devin, Nived, McLaughlin. First a round of applause for Scott. Oh, almost missed that. All right, and then Devin, Nived McLaughlin, is a multifaceted artist based in New Bedford. He uses an array of styles and mediums in his art, ranging from classical to abstract. Native to the south coast of New England, he finds an endless source of inspiration in the surrounding mix of post-industrial cities, rural landscapes, and the Atlantic. Nived's passions lie in connecting and developing creative communities and cultivating an appreciation for the arts. He is frequently involved in teaching painting workshops and educating individuals through schools, museums, and private instruction. So let's give it up to our hosts here, Nived and Scott, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Brendan. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about how the Fine Art Club kind of runs first. We are here at the New Bedford Art Museum, so thank you, New Bedford Art Museum, for hosting us. Thank you. It's an amazing space. During our afterglow, which is the end of our program, I encourage everybody to look around at the artwork that we're going to be having on the walls around, as well as the artwork we're featuring tonight. During the Fine Art Club, we have a little how-to, how it works up there. Essentially, what's going to happen is we're going to have artists come up. They're going to sit up here, talk with me for about 5 minutes. We're going to go back and forth about some questions, find out about who they are, what their artwork's all about, and then it's also open to you, the crowd, to ask any questions. Within that 5 minutes that the artists are up here, feel free to raise your hand, let us know, and then we'll bring a mic over to you. Scott will bring a mic over to you, and then you can ask your question directly to the artist. If you don't get your question answered, don't worry. During the afterglow, after all of the artwork is shown, you'll have a chance to mix and mingle with the artist. You'll be able to talk to everybody. I do want to remind everybody here, please silence your phones because this is recorded. It's always the thing that happens. So we just want to make sure that we can see everything, hear everything. So it's 5 minutes. We have the Q&A that's a part of those 5 minutes. Attendees, again, raise your hands to ask questions. And our very first artist of the night is going to be Beatrice Alder out of New Bedford. Beatrice, come on up. Welcome, Beatrice, everybody. And super cool. Everyone take a look right here. And yeah. All right, very cool. All right, welcome, Beatrice. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm good.
Good. So you have two pieces here that are pretty awesome, but before we talk about the artwork, let's talk about you a little bit. Tell us when you create, why do you create? What do you do? How do you do it? And what's your process?
Thank you, and thanks so much for having me. So I actually began as a writer.
I think you just look it up.
Here we go.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah.
I began as a writer and a historian before I really started seriously exploring visual arts. So all of my visual arts are narrative in nature. They're all telling a story or reflecting on some sort of history, and I'm really inspired by folk art and by nature as well.
They do have this feel of, being in a three-dimensional illustration of sorts. So we'll take a look at the first slide here. So this one here that you have, I dig the way that you photographed it. It's amongst the seaweed and the rocks. And the piece itself has those elements that are part of the background. So I'm assuming the inspiration came from the sea, but tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so this piece is called Selkie. It's ceramic wall art, and I was inspired by Norse and Celtic folklore about shape-shifting beings that may appear as seals or may appear as humans. In the Scottish tradition, they're called Selkies, although there are many names for them. And Selkies move between the land and the sea. They're neither one thing or the other. And that's an in-betweenness that I tried to capture with these not quite human, not quite seal features on the mask.
I dig that. With this piece, it's meant to hang on a wall, right? And we have some cool detail shots here. So, and I do encourage everybody to take a look at these up close. And we have the slide here where you get those details. And it's the glazing colors, right, that you're using to get all that? When you're doing the glazing, do you have a clear idea of what's going to happen in the end, or is there a little bit of the process that's just kind of up in the air?
This was a glaze combination that actually, well, my spouse and I discovered by accident at our community clay studio. That green spotty effect was originally, I was trying to put black glaze on top of that blue glaze, and it turned out to be a third thing entirely. And I was actually delighted with it, so I intentionally used it for the second piece. The first piece, I didn't mean it to be that way, but...
It's happy accidents, right?
Yes.
They kind of turned out the right way. Very cool. All right, and then we have another one here. Now, this is the one you came over and you turned on. So it's a lamp or a nightlight kind of vibe that we got going on here. It makes it a little bit more functional, but it also really draws you in just by having that extra element of it lights up. It's its own light source, and it sets a mood for sure. And the way you photographed it here, you can see it in that kind of darkened room, and I think that's really making it stand up, and you got a lot of drama there. Tell us about this piece. I especially want to know about the engravings, the etchings that you have on there.
Yeah. So this piece is called Thickly Settled. I didn't grow up in New Bedford. I'm a transplant from the Pacific Northwest. So I had never seen the thickly settled road signs until I moved to Massachusetts. And I was really charmed by that phrase. It made me think about all of the ways in which our cities are densely populated, not just by humans, but by plants and insects and birds and other urban wildlife. So I decorated the outside of this lamp with some of our underappreciated non-human neighbors, like crows, raccoons, spiders, coyotes. rabbits, ants you'll see on the front. There's a wasp, there's an inchworm, there's also nettle, maple, and nasturtium. 3 plants I really love, and dandelions. Just to remind us that a house is still part of an ecosystem.
I love that. And, you know, a house is part of an ecosystem, but you're also showing that these creatures and animals and plants are also the house itself, right? We're living in that. I think it's super charming, really beautiful. When you're creating your work, you know, you said you would go into this this place where you're doing stories, narratives almost. And I think it's really interesting. You took something that, growing up in this area, that thickly settled sign, I just see that all the time. And it doesn't mean anything to me because I'm so overexposed to it. But for you, it's something that you made it really whimsical. And you brought this piece together with that, you know, whimsy.
Ding, ding, ding. Oh.
And that's our 5 minutes. But before we're gonna let you go, a couple quick things. Do you have any upcoming events that you want to plug? And do we want to take any questions from the crowd here?
So I am going to be part of a collaboration, an installation that of the women's work exhibition at the Whaling Museum, which should be going up in January. So keep an eye out for that.
All right, awesome. And then I'm going to open it up for questions. If anybody has one, raise your hand. All right. Thank you very much for coming. And we're going to switch out for the next artist. And Spot's going to introduce them.
Our next artist is Ewa Liput. Ewa has 2 pieces. Ewa's from Dartmouth, by the way. The pieces are Woman, 11 by 6 by 5.5 inches, and Alexander the Great, age 5, 9 by 2 3/4 by 3 1/4 inches. Both are fired clay. Each is priced at $450.
It's not already. All right, welcome. How have you been? All right. Well, welcome. So you've shown with us before a couple of times, and normally what I see you bring to us are these gigantic paintings that are, 8 feet by 8 feet. They're huge. They have to be strapped to the top of a truck. And this is something that I've never seen from you before. I didn't realize that you also did sculpture, and these pieces are really, they're heavy and they're visceral, and they have this depth to them that I really enjoy. Can you tell us a little bit about you as an artist and your sculpture work, and then talk about these pieces a little bit?
Yes, I was born in Poland, and I studied in Academy of Fine Arts in Poland for 2 years, where I moved to United States after that and continued study at University of Massachusetts Dartmouth and also Boston University. And my major was painting, but in Poland we have a very formal training for art, and I had a formal training in a sculpture too. And history, and also I studied the history, and history showed that many artists really, even if they were painters, they went and sometimes work on a sculpture. And the reasons for that, I think, is that the painting can go many times wrong, or many times in 100 or thousands directions, and we tend as a painter to sail and then make the story what we want to depict, which in my opinion the sculpture is very accurate. It's you get the sculpture or you don't get. So it means that the depiction is very centered in a sculpture, and I think it's why the painters sometimes just tend to go and do the sculpture, because they need this accurate answer. So this is the reasons that I do a sculpture too. And I do the large sculpture too, but it just was easy to submit the small pieces, and also it's nice to have something in a room. It's like, you know, you can't get the object, but it's almost feel like a real person.
Yeah. Can you talk about the Alexander the Great sculpture that you have here? Both of these have very different forms to them. In this piece, I like that you have these shapes that are abstract, but then these really obvious forms of the head and the pedestal, that kind of square at the bottom. Can you talk to us about like what the process was here and what the meaning is behind the piece?
Yes. It's generally what the meaning of this sculpture is that at some point I find out that Alexander the Great, when he was 5 years old, he inherited whole Greece. And I just like couldn't believe it, like how somebody can just get own country. It's like the son of the Prince William gonna become the king, and he barely did anything. So that was why I really just, start to think about how it's possible that so young person can just, get a whole country. And Alexander the Great was a very interesting person. And it's why I depict him in the age of 5, because his life was very short. And I have a photograph when he was 10 years old. And he passed, he lost life when he was 32 years old. So this is the photograph of him when he was 10 years old. So in my process, I want to just, make at least likeness to the way he looked. And I also need to say that I really like the Asian sculpture. It's like almost, I use the process to fire the clay because almost to the point like you're gonna lose something, and then becomes so valuable for you in the process of doing. So I add also the wooden beads. It's like in a form of, that he was something different, like a royal or something, where some kind of, point to the people that they a little bit different. And also I signed the sculpture because I wasn't sure that I really, get Alexander the Great in age 5, so I write the name of the sculpture for you guys.
I love what that adds to it. I think that's great. And let's talk about the other piece too, because we don't want to run out of time too much. So this one, titled Woman, you have the base is made out of wood, right? And then the piece on top, that's fired clay?
Yes, it's also fired clay, and it's generally the bust of the woman, which, during the history, it's a lot of women were depicted. And what is in this form, that I just generally want to get the form of the woman, which usually they always wear some kind of decorative clothes, not just clothes to dress themselves, but like 3/4 turn of the head. It become more interesting when the woman pose. And when I work on the neck, I use some, because it's very difficult to the sculpture in a clay. I use some ceramic which make very smooth. And the process to do a sculpture in a clay is very difficult because it's very hard when you want to fire the clay, and you have to have an even thickness, otherwise you may not get what you want. So this is just the wooden pedestal. It's just form of pedestal. It's not like belong to the sculpture. It's just you need something to, and I just have it, so it's easy just to put on the top.
I think it's really interesting that you have you have the gesture almost of, the bust, but at the same time, you kept it very abstract. But it does, it reads as that 3/4 turn in that view. It's very classical. And I love the way that you do that. And, I know we don't have paintings of yours here now, but I can see almost a clear line with the style of your paintings and the style of your sculpture, where you have a very controlled looseness to it, where you can tell that you've done things very intentionally, but they look so smooth and effortless and natural, and I love that about your work. So awesome.
Thank you very much.
No problem. And I know that we're going to get close on time too, so I'm going to open it up for questions, and if there's anything that you have coming up, do you have anything that you have coming up for art shows or anything like that you might want to?
Oh, it's not really. I just print out some like more sculpture. If anyone, it's like I just can put away for you guys can have it, and because we are restricted here just to show two, but I photographed 4 of them.
Wonderful, great. And I'm going to open it up for questions, if anybody has any questions about the 2 pieces that we have up here. All right. And I think that we're going to go ahead, and thank you so much for coming on out.
Thank you.
And could you have...
Our next artist is Lindsey Epstein from Tiverton, Rhode Island. You can find Lindsey's website at lapottery.com, also on social media, Instagram @lapottery. Lindsey has 2 pieces. The first is a crystalline glazed vase in nickel, 22 by 9.5 inches. The price is $1,600. And the crystalline glazed jar in light green, 10 by 7 inches for $350. Each of these is a crystalline vase made from porcelain clay on the potter's wheel.
Welcome, Lindsey.
Hello. Hi, thank you.
Awesome. This is the first time you've come to the Fine Art Club, right? So
Yes.
Welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Your pieces, I'm seeing them now for the first time under this light and being here in person. The photos don't do them justice. These are gorgeous up close. I love the way that the light's shimmering on there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about you.
Sure. These pieces in particular are difficult to photograph. I think a lot of clay work can be. But especially, you talked about how the light reflects off of them. So these pieces are crystalline glazed, and the things that look like flowers are zinc crystals that grow during the firing process. So I'm not painting the crystals on, I'm not putting them anywhere in particular. It really has to do, the crystals grow during the firing based on the chemistry of the glaze and how the piece is fired. So it's not like one thing that makes the crystals happen, it's the entire process from start to finish that will either make the crystals grow and look nice or it'll be terrible. So the way that the light reflects off of the crystals really changes how they end up looking.
So when you're actually doing the glazing process of this, is it like you're completely blind to what's going to happen? You just do like an entire layer on, or is it you kind of section it off?
No, it's just one glaze. Wow. And it looks gross. I mean, it looks nothing like this at all. This one is kind of like a reddish brown color before it's fired, and the glazed surface is very textured actually, because these are brushed on, they're not dipped or sprayed. The other thing with the crystalline is the glaze settles a bit if you make a batch ahead of time. So some glazes you can make a batch and put it in a bucket and store it for a while and it's totally fine. With these crystalline pieces, I'm making the glaze specifically for each piece every single firing. So there's a lot of extra work involved. And the other part of the crystalline process too is that the glaze is very fluid and runny in order to get the crystals to form. So normally there's some clay in a glaze to help it be stable and make it stick to where it's going to go. These don't have clay in the glaze. So every piece is made, fired on top of a little tiny ring and then on top of a plate. And then those three pieces, it's like stacked on top of each other. They go into the kiln. When it comes out, it's all one piece fused together with a bunch of glaze in the bottom plate. Then that has to be cut off and the bottom has to be ground down smooth. So there's a lot of extra steps involved with the crystalline process, but you have no idea what it's going to look like before it comes out.
That's awesome. This is my first time ever seeing, the process like this at all in person. And again, I'm blown away by it. Do you have control over the colors that you get to put on there?
Yes. So the way that I title the pieces is basically what's in the glaze. So this blue and orange one is actually colored with nickel. Both of these have the same base glaze, which would just be like a white or clear on top of the porcelain clay. So then you add different metal oxides to get the colorants. So this one has nickel in it, and the nickel is the only one that gives such a stark contrast between the crystal and the background color. And that is because nickel is mined near cobalt, and the cobalt contaminates the nickel supply. So you have trace amounts of cobalt that make the crystal blue, and then the background orange. And the green one is colored with copper. So you can add all different stuff to get different colors.
That's awesome. How long have you been creating sculptures?
I started in 2003, so whatever year, 21 years.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I mean, I met you at your studio for the very first time, which is a really cool spot. And you're part of the Westport Art Guild?
The South Coast Artists Group, yeah.
Nice. Can you talk to us a little bit about your space and your, not just the process of these pieces, but when you're making your body of work and when you're interacting with clients and crowds as you have people come through, what's your goal for your artwork as far as putting it out there or displaying your stuff?
Well, that's a multi-part question. So the first one that I'll start with is that my studio is in Tiverton, Rhode Island, and it's a separate building kind of on the property where my house is. That's where I do my work, and then I have a little gallery section where people can come in and view stuff, and then I do select times throughout the year where my studio is more open and pretty instead of just a messy workspace, so that people can come in and view the work or purchase it. I make lots of different types of work, so I have my crystalline pieces, I have a full line of more utilitarian functional pottery, and then I also do sculptures, mostly of horses, but I do some other animals as well. So I really like to make objects that are useful and that you can have in your home and have something beautiful to look at, whether it's a cup of coffee or a more statement piece or a bowl or something to that effect. I want you to be able to spark joy and wonder in the things that you're using every day.
Very
Ding,
cool.
ding, ding.
Oh, and that is our time.
Good time.
But this is, again, your time to plug any upcoming events, and we're also going to take some questions if anybody has any of those.
Sure. My studio will be open on the weekends from Thanksgiving to Christmas if you want to stop by in Tiverton. And I have some work at the Attleboro Arts Museum for their members exhibition and also their upcoming benefit art auction. So.
Awesome. And do we have any questions before we say goodbye to Lindsey? Oh. Oh, all right. we saw a hello. Thought it was a question. All right, Lindsey, thank you so much for sharing your process and all of your beautiful work. Thank you so much.
Our next artist is Dot Bergen from Little Compton, Rhode Island. You can find Dot's website at dotbergenart.com and on Instagram at dotbergen. Dot has two pieces, One Life and Boys in the Boat. These are the two pieces of work Same measurements, 21 by 5 by 3 inches, same price, $795. Both feature hollow tubes of resin and beeswax interspersed among lace saturated with resin and beeswax seated on a wooden box.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm
Thanks.
excited to be here.
Thanks for being here. Your pieces are super intricate and very interesting to look at. I want to talk first about you, though. Tell me about your body of work, how you got into art. I want to know about your whole process here.
Sure. So I'm formally trained as a scientist, as a marine ecologist and an invertebrate zoologist. In about 2002, I began working with fiber, making art quilts, and then about 2015, I began working with encaustics. And for those of you who don't know, encaustics is using Damar resin and beeswax to paint and sculpt. It's a very versatile medium, and you can paint flat, two-dimensionally, or you can sculpt three-dimensionally as well. So because of my formal training as a scientist, the ocean and the marine environment feature in a lot of my work, not on purpose, it just comes out. I don't know where it comes from, but it just comes out.
I feel like we end up getting inspired by things that we've just been exposed to in our lives. And,
Sure.
The ocean, I think, is also an endless supply of, fun inspiration. The two pieces that you brought to us are wall-mounted, we have canvas-mounted today, pieces, and they have lots of intricate little pieces. It looks to me like doilies, or you have that pattern in there, and then cone shapes, and like curled over pieces. And you were saying that is encaustics that you're using on there?
Yes, so I have, the pieces are built on wooden boxes, and the wooden boxes are stained to emulate the weathering of driftwood floating around in the ocean. And then the surface of the pieces have hollow tubes of wax. I paint the wax, different colors, different layers of wax in sheets on a board or other ways, but generally on a board. And then I lift up the wax and I sculpt it with my hands, and I place it on the boxes along with the interspersed lacy elements, which actually are lace, some vintage lace and some lace that's contemporary, but just about all of it are comprised of natural fibers. Because if you have ever seen raw beeswax, it's a solid at room temperature, so I have to work with fire. And so I can't work with anything that's not a natural fiber because it will melt in a way I don't want it to. I want the wax to melt, but I couldn't work with nylon, for example, because that would melt in a way that I wouldn't be able to control.
So with the natural fibers of the fabric that you have, are you dipping it into the wax bath kind of deal?
So the lace is saturated in wax, and then first it's cut into the shapes and sizes that I want, and then it's saturated in the hot wax, and then once it's hardened, I shape it on the pieces.
Now, with pieces like this, where you have a lot of little elements and they're really tightly woven together, do you go in it with a solid plan of where everything's going to be laid out, or do you kind of move it and go organically and piece it together as you're making it?
Good question. Just as I'm an intuitive painter, I am an intuitive sculptor as well. A lot of what will dictate how the piece turns out depends upon the layers of wax and what they look like when I roll them and shape them. Once I get a feel for that, then I decide which tubes will predominate and which will play a supporting role, and then I feed the lace into the places where their supporting role is needed.
Yeah. And you mentioned the ocean already, and this does remind me of coral and marine animals and things like that. Is there specific things that you're drawing inspiration from with these shapes and the...
Yes, so these two pieces are part of a recent series I'm working on called Marginalized Communities. I recently read an article, a study came out of Woods Hole recently that suggested a certain community in the ocean could be pivotal in preventing catastrophic climate change. And that community lives in an area in the ocean called the Twilight Zone. And the problem is that right now countries around the world are offering licenses to commercial fishing fleets to fish out this zone because there's a shortage of fish food for fish farms around the world. And so this inspired me to ask the question, should we exploit a community before we really understand what value it can add to us? And as I went along and continued working in this series, I realized it's really more than just about marginalized communities in the ocean. It's about immigrant communities and LGBTQ communities and other communities around the world, and asking the question, what kind of value do they add to our shared human experience? And should we, before we fully understand that, should we ostracize, vilify, exploit, even eradicate? So those are the things that I think about as I create these pieces.
Ding, ding, ding.
I'm going to say one more thing. I have a question. So, interrupting if anybody else wants to ask any questions. So you did mention that you have this meaning that you've ascribed to it, and that you're also an intuitive sculptor. A lot of times with my own artwork, I will find meaning in the creation and then realize what I'm doing almost halfway through. Did you start with the idea first and then create the piece, or were you in the process of creating a piece and then you found its meaning in
That's such a great question. So the first piece in the series, I was just messing around and I was experimenting, which I do a lot in my studio. And I created about half of the first piece, and I held it up and I showed it to my husband and I said, "What do you think?" And he said, "Keep going." And so then I kept going and I finished it, and I looked at it and I looked at it. And that's when I made the connection with the article I had read about this recent study in this community in the ocean, and how important it could be if only we knew enough about it, if only we could, keep it around long enough to understand it more.
All right. And the last thing, anything to plug? Anything coming up?
Yes, actually, these two pieces tomorrow morning at 12 o'clock will be dropped off at the Bristol Art Museum. They'll be there for 1 month, and then they'll be coming back.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much, Dot.
All right, thank you.
Our next artist is Charles Hauck from New Bedford. Mr. Hauck's website is charleshauck.weebly.com. Charles has brought a bunch of his fish fossils. The one pictured in your program is fish fossil 3, 10 by 10 inches. Fish created from fish fossil photos for $150. I'm standing underneath the one pictured in your program, and he has a number of others that he's pulling out right now. But the group here, I'm pointing out right now, this one is in your program. More to come.
Chuck makes things fun. Chuck's, for those on the camera at home, Chuck just handed out a bunch of his fish so that people will take a close look. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. So, Chuck, you have been a staple in the downtown New Bedford art scene since as long as I can remember. And you've been doing really interesting sculptures for super, super long time. And they've always changed and developed, and I've seen green kangaroos with teeth. I've seen amalgamations and puns turned into sculptures. And now you have a series of some really amazing fish, which, again, if you guys can't see, they are up over there and going around in the crowd. So tell me about you as an artist. What can we see from the pieces that we have here and from the stuff that you've done in the past?
I'm sort of working toward doing like a environmental sculpture called the Air Aquarium, where I want to use a lot of my older sculptures and make fish and whales and all kinds of things. And I was trying to think of a way that I could add more fish without it being as complicated. And I do a lot for inspiration. I do Google image searches, find things that are interesting. I like a little humor or scary, toothy things, I think. And fossils always interested me, and I thought, oh, geez, printing the fossils and then making copies out of them. I use Lexan and sort of trace the skeleton, and then I use epoxy or a resin sort of on the head, make the head more three-dimensional, and the rest just keep it flat, keep it simple, and then I just sort of make up the colors for what they are, because I don't know what colors they were, so I kind of have fun with that. And I'm hoping to create a number of the mobile, sort of they can be part of the sculpture, swimming around, I make things that are complicated, where it's I spend more time fixing them than I do actually in building them off. And so this was kind of a simple way, just almost cheating. I'm not having to build anything. I'm just copying them, painting them, and a little epoxy on the face. But it's kind of a thrill to see this thing. All of a sudden, when it's done, you hang it up, and it's like, wow, this is kind of what this fish looked like. It was so sort of giving them back life, and.
I think that's great. The way that you're displaying them in different ways, like these are hung in a tree, right? So they're just in an environment that you wouldn't normally see fish, just floating in trees and things like that. And the fact that you're drawing the inspiration from the fossils is really interesting. What led you to seek fossils of fish as inspiration? In this area we have a lot.
I do like Google image searches. I do combinations of ugly animals, or creatures. I think my number one goal is when I make something, I want when people see it, say, "Wow, I've never seen one of those before."
Yeah.
That's sort of. I don't really like making things that just sort of sit there and just sit there, that are stagnant. I like to have them to do something.
Yeah, having them hanging in on a mobile does make them more dynamic, just because they're shifting in the wind and things like that. These are really fantastic, and I didn't realize that you had so many of them. We have 2 photos up here, but the ones going around in the crowd and the ones up here behind me, you have quite a few of them going on, huh?
Well, and this is sort of the start. I'd like to do a number more. I'd like to do an outdoor sculpture with my other sculptures and these sort of air aquarium. So the idea is like you're in the middle of the Acushnet River, Fairhaven on one side, New Bedford on the other. And if it was an area with walls, I'd love to do like murals of each landscape, and then inside you're walking around with plants and things that are simulating like the ocean,
So this is really the basis of a much larger project that you're going to be trying to do.
This is something to go with something. I'm hoping a collaborative event, and just create a sort of an ocean scene that you can kind of walk around it and hang out and things flying overhead.
I love that. Now, in the other, that's our time. So, do you have any upcoming events that are going to be happening anytime in the near future that you want to plug?
A lot of these will be hanging at Gallery X next month. November 9th is the opening, 5 to 8. Paw Prints is the show. And it's also an open show if any artists have any animal-related artwork they'd like to see. November 3rd is the deadline.
Awesome. And if anybody has any questions, we can open up for that. Questions? Put your hand up.
create your fishes. You just like, connect yourself to ocean world. But when I look at them, they almost look like human characters. So it's amazing that, look at this one. Look at the one in the back. So I think they have a much wider meaning that just the depiction of the fish,
Yeah,
I really love them. They're beautiful.
It's a happy surprise when they're done and you hang them up and you're like, ah!
You get that little joy, like, oh, that's what I did. Like, wow. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming out, Czech. We're going to be switching off to the next artist.
Our next artist is Paulina Fuenzalida. You can find Paulina at paulina.art on Instagram. Paulina has 2 pieces, Glint, 15 by 20 feet, $35,000. This is a group of handmade felted human figures stripped of distinguishing features such as color, gender, or specific traits. You can see one of these figures to my right. And then the other piece is Resistance, 36 by 22 inches. This ceramic and felt piece visually explores resistance to change. It's priced at $750.
All right, welcome. So, you've been up a couple of times. This is your 3rd or 4th
Maybe
time coming to the
4th,
Fine Art Club. Yeah, and every single time you come with something that is so dramatically different than the stuff that you've shown previous. Today we're looking at pieces where you're using ceramic and textile and these so beautiful, these huge ghostly forms that we have here. So wherever you want to start, talking about you or talking about other pieces, it's up to you.
Thank you.
No problem.
Well, I want to quote some sentences because it's more easy to then develop the idea.
Sure.
This installation captured the mystery and curiosity of how we subconsciously understand one another beyond the physical. I try to represent the moment when you meet someone, you see more than your body, you see your eyes. For me, the eyes are very important, is the window of the soul. And for me, there are a lot of information that you can share with other people and the vibes and all of stuff more than give a hug or give a kiss or give the hands. And I was thinking in this moment with this installation, and I think I really captive the energy, because when it's all the people in the same place, all the figure represent the human body, you can feel some vibration. That happened when I was studying at Dartmouth, my MFA program, and I was in the gallery, in a small gallery in the 2nd floor, and in some moment, some kids arrived to the building and they was like, oh, they are singing, what happened here? It was so funny for me. And I really was very happy because I tried to convey something, and I think that happened something.
I love that description of this. And the title is Glint, right? Like a glint in the eye, the little spark of life that we see and we recognize with each other.
Yes.
And, seeing that where you have all of the pieces together shows the recognition. When you see somebody and you have a moment of connection where you really realize that person. I love that.
You can connect or also reject the person. Yeah,
Right.
where you feel not confident with the people.
Sometimes I see people and I'm like, I don't like that energy, so right on with it, you know. And the other piece that you brought here were these letters that seem to be shedding their skin almost. It reminds me of like a snake would shed its skin, or you know, a lizard or something like that. Can you talk to me about those and what we're seeing when we look at these?
For sure, yeah. Vowels. Vowels are so important in different languages, and you pronounce different and struggle with the vowels in different languages. And I want to quote another sentence that explain a little bit. This work evokes the complexity of change and the persistence of identity. When I write to USA and I try to speak in English, when it was in my early 50s, not very young people, you know, and the nerves are more stride and it's more difficult to connect with the new language. But I love to be outside my comfort zone. I think it's an important way to learn about the world, to learn the other people, to learn a new culture and try to immerse in a new, different way to think. The language gives frame, and when you learn another language, you achieve a new frame for understand the world.
I like that. So, you know, the connection with vowels, right?
Yeah.
A different language, a different way to use something that you're already familiar with, but in a different way, right?
Yes.
That's really fascinating to me. I've tried to pick up some other languages, and I feel like I just don't have the ability to. But immersion seems to be that way. What is the significance of the fabric versus the hard ceramics?
Good question. Thank you. This is a fight. The Spanish, in some way, is the soft fiber try to be connected with the ceramic that is strained, different. You can try to connect, and it's a fight. You are struggling to learn a new language. You are struggling to learn a new way to thinking, because you bring another stuff. You bring another culture, idiosyncrasy, and you need to connect themselves to can express yourself in a new language in a new country. And I think it is a part of the process when you are migration. The people who come from other countries, the same happened in Chile, my country when I'm from. The people who arrive to Chile try to learn Spanish, and it's difficult also for them. It's inverse, you know?
That's great. And the part that I think I really connect to the most on this is that you've done this coloration where it's light at the top,
Yeah.
and then when they get together, that forced place of them being together, two very opposed textures and fibers, the color blends.
Mm-hmm.
And it has that overlapping significance and connection and fusing right
Exactly.
there.
Yeah, this was my intention.
Yeah.
Try to connect the different vowels that they are merging, they connect themselves, melt in some point, because you need to go beyond. You need to continue working and achieve the new language or achieve the new culture.
And
it's
I can
in
see
a
this
process.
I can see this being a metaphor for other things as well. You know, whenever you have something where you're learning something anew that you are familiar with in a different way, there has to be a way that you can relate it to what you've already known and what you've already come from. So this is absolutely wonderful.
Ding, ding.
Oh, and there's their timer. So we're going to open it up for questions if anybody has that, and then also if you have anything coming up.
Thank you. I love the vowels. I think they're fabulous. My question is, how do you see them being displayed?
Oh, they need to be in the wall. Yeah, need to be in the wall. I usually put in the wall when I go do some exhibition and present the pieces. Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Here is not the best way. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, and do you have anything coming up that you can plug or any
Oh, I
upcoming
hope the
things?
2025. I hope this next year I will do a soul exhibition, independent exhibition. I'm waiting for some funds
All right.
that apply right now.
And we can, if we follow your social medias, you'll be
you can
posting
follow
about it, right?
Instagram, yeah, a lot of work now with paper, embroidery over the paper, that other language to show something interesting or like feeling or thought.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on out.
Thank you, Devin.
No problem. We're going to switch over to the next artist.
Our next artist is Heather Martin. Heather owns Rising Tide Pottery Studio in New Bedford, which just opened in August. Heather has 2 pieces, Flourish, 6 by 6 by 13 inches, a tall ceramic cylinder vase, adorned with barnacle and ocean-inspired textures, priced at $450, and Tolerance Experiment 2, 5 by 5 by 10 inches, stoneware vase with glossy gradient color and sponge texture, priced at $350.
Welcome, Heather.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. So the pieces that we have here, first, the textures, the colors, they're all really amazing. And you did just open up at Hatch Street Studios, right?
Yes, I did. Yes.
So let's talk first about your new studio that you just opened up, and what you do there, and your process as an artist, and who are you as an artist?
Sure. Yeah. So at Hatch Street, I opened in August. It is a membership-based ceramic studio, but I also do a bunch of classes. So we've got wheel throwing and hand building, and some kids like homeschool drop-in classes, and it's also my studio for my own work, as an artist. And so where do I go from? How do I?
So what I'm saying, and it almost is like there's a common theme tonight. So many people are inspired by the ocean. I mean, I may be wrong here, but that feels very ocean-inspired to me.
Yes.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I spent my summers in Fairhaven on West Island, and just on the beach, like in the rocks, and plucking barnacles off the rocks, and all these clusters of mussel shells. And as I've gotten to be an adult, the beach is just kind of where I go back to, and I think a lot of us in this room can probably say the same thing. There's just this return to your inner child and your place of calm. And so for me, when I was first getting into clay, it's just kind of like Dot said, like it just appeared, like it's just what comes out, like it just, I can't help it. And the more I looked, the more I wanted to find new textures and new ways of approaching it. So I have a 9-year-old son, and he has a lot of ocean books, and I was even going to old book sales and looking for, all of these different biology books that would have these amoebas and all these fun little textures and just different abstract shapes that I could start to incorporate in the work.
And what do you want viewers to take away when they are looking at your work? Especially where you have things like this one, which are a little bit more structured, and you can tell, clearly barnacles, different textures are here in different colors, as opposed to something that's a little bit more abstract that still feels very nautical and very natural in its own way, as the 2 pieces here. And this is also not the piece that we have here, but it is the one in the brochure. So just
these are 2 different.
Yes.
I think that's twofold. I think one, for me, a lot of this is not about the work at all. It's about the process, and it's about sitting and having this meditative, repetitive process. And these are called the Tolerance Experiment, or it's the series of work that I've been making, exploring tolerance in so many different capacities, whether it's my ability to sit there and tolerate making hundreds or thousands of dots at one time, but what's going on in my head at that time. It's like you're in this flow state, and I'm channeling something, I don't know what, but I'm channeling something, and this is appearing. It's therapeutic for me. It's really not always about the finished product, which is what I've always said to my students. I taught public school for 7 years, and I taught art, and I would say that to my students. It's not always about making something that's pretty. It's about your ideas, and it's about, the process as well. Like, art is here to better you. It's to better the people around you, and that's a lot of my intention is my process. If I get something really cool as a result, that's amazing. And I think my theme with the barnacles and with the sea life too, being in this area, I was chatting with a friend last week and talking about New Bedford Harbor and how it's one of the bigger Superfund sites in this country, and she had no idea. She didn't know about the pollution and what is quite literally surrounding us, and so that too, that was a little bit of my thesis work as well, as really investigating public art and how it can influence local histories and what is really going on around us. And you make something that's really cool, but it doesn't end here. How is it gonna spark a dialogue about what's the next step? Let's dig a little deeper.
I love that. The other thing I was going to ask you about these pieces, and this is going to be a little bit different than my other questions. Has anyone ever told you that your pieces might make them feel uncomfortable or uneasy because of some of those repeated textures?
I have heard of this, although it's obviously not myself because I'm working with this all the time. I don't. What is that?
Trypophobia, tryptophobia, something along those lines.
Anyone in the audience know what we're talking about?
Trypophobia. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Look away.
Look away. But no, I have absolutely heard that, and that was not even on the radar when I started this. So,
I mean, when I first saw your pieces, my immediate thought was, wow! And it draws you in. The process that you're talking about, definitely, it takes a lot of time to do that, and you can see that. It's evident by just the amount of texture, the amount of work, and the amount of detail that ends up on these pieces. And also, just how they change. The ones with all these holes in them, they'll have smaller sections where it's a little bit tighter clustered, and then some areas where it's a little bit larger. Is that conscious, or is that something that happens when you're kind of in that meditative state as you go through it?
It kind of, it became more intentional the more happy accidents occurred while I was working. I just have these little wooden tools. They're just pencils, and because the wood will absorb a little water and it releases from the clay pretty easily, so that's why I like to use the wooden tool versus like the plastic ones. And no, it was becoming, it was really coming to life as I was really stretching and playing with the tolerance of this stoneware. This is not a groggy stoneware, so when you say we add grog to a clay, it makes it a little bit sturdier so you can build bigger with it, but this clay is not as tolerant, and so I was really just pushing to see how far I can get with some bigger stretches and smaller manipulations, and really seeing what that end result is, a little bit more of an organic, abstract look to it, which I'm continuing with more and more pieces, and I'm excited to see kind of how it evolves from there as I make more of them.
Yeah, and you had said that with Flourish it was something where it was almost a game of collecting textures, right?
Yes.
And then you have the more meditative stuff where you're doing all the holes and things. And the inspiration came, you said, from the ocean mostly, right?
Yes, in a way, yeah.
Was there a point where you were like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna make holes, that's the process, that's what I want to do? Or how did you arrive at going from ocean to little holes and the process? What led you there to make your first one where it was about the process for you?
That's a great question. I mean, I think for me, doing this, it's a lot of work. I won't lie, it's a lot of work, and it's planning the space and making sure it's not cracking, because this top one is actually porcelain. This is porcelain, this is stoneware, and so there were a lot of just technical issues with cracking and making sure I was covering it with wax in the right spots, and I was like, what if I just pare this down, if I edit this to just repeat one thing over, how is this going to look? And this one is built with a slab. I rolled it, so it's a slab cylinder, and then this one was coil built, so really big fat coils that I just coiled up and made the big form first before I went through and pierced it all the way around. So yeah, I mean, the ocean is definitely, this is actually the third piece in a series of 3 that I was doing as part of my master's. And the pieces evolved from really beat up and kind of tired looking to much more, I won't say evolved, but really flourishing. And it's you know, metaphor for growth and evolution of the self. So.
And you're using, you know, an additive process with the first one, and then as that birthed this subtractive process with the second one. I know that, you know, when a lot of people are sculpting, it's hard to take away sometimes. If you're used to building up something, taking away can be a little bit of a hard transition over. And it's interesting that you have these 2 very different processes that still have a cohesive feeling, and you know, you can tell it's your work. You know, I think that's hard for a lot of people to find style. How do you feel your style? How important is your style to your work?
I think it's becoming increasingly important as I'm kind of working through this series and really kind of coming into my own as an artist versus, you know, a teacher and a mother. And I think that it is incredibly important. And as I, you know, move forward, I want to go bigger. I want to be more impactful. When, you know, you walk into a room, I want you to see it, to spark that conversation, you know, not just, I've noticed that I've shown my work in some other venues, and sometimes it doesn't show well because it's small and it's so detailed and it's really hard to see. I mean, even just Alex's work in the room over there, like, it hits you in the face, and that's, you know, that's just part of it. You really want that impact to get your point across.
Even though you do have that, you know, small details, I think that your work is inviting, and I think it beckons people to come and take a closer look and pay attention to all those details. When you're at the studio and you're working with others in your classes, are you teaching them this kind of stuff, or are you just teaching them kind of baser things, or what kind of things do you offer?
Great question. So I have a lot of folks coming in for wheel throwing now. They want to get their hands dirty. They think the spinning wheel is so fun, and they want that experience. And also just a time to bond with others. So a lot of groups that come in that want to make a project together. And so we've done some mugs, just functional things with templates, and not this involved. I had actually taught a class at my house out of my kitchen before I had my studio about 1.5 years ago, and many people in my neighborhood said, I want to make your stuff, I want to make this. So we went for it, and with varied results. A lot of people, you know, I think underestimate with clay, if you guys have worked with clay, like how much time you have to invest. And it's like learning to read or learning to write. You're not going to write a novel in a day, like with most media, right? You're gonna learn a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then eventually you will have, you know, your skill set. But I think with clay, it's a little, clay is kind of fresh like that. Like, you think it's going to be easy, like, oh, I did play dough as a kid, and I can, you know, make it do what I want. And it's an exercise in patience and humility. I think working with clay, it has been for me too. But yeah, no, we do a lot of just fun, functional stuff. A lot of slabs, a lot of mugs.
And anything big coming up?
I was just accepted a residency at Watershed Ceramics up in Maine for February, so I will be in Maine for the whole month of February. I'm so excited to go up there and be in the snow and really get into some groggy clay and work really big. So I'm thrilled, and so I will not be.
Awesome, great. And I think we can open it up to questions from the crowd. I think I'm getting a look. Did I get a beep, beep, beep? Oh, I did get a beep, beep. All right, so any questions? No? All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much for coming on up. Yeah, I mean, don't be fooled. That's a big chunk of metal. All right, I would like everybody to welcome Erik Durant, a wonderful sculpture artist out of New Bedford, Massachusetts. A teacher, you've done massive installation pieces all around. You're doing these pieces in clay and metal, and you've done things in aqua resin and very interesting things that have been all around the place. Let's talk about you a little bit before you talk about the stuff you want to talk about.
Yeah, I warned Devin in advance that I'm an artist, like many of you. I'm an artist, which means I don't want to talk about what I did. I don't even want to talk about what I'm doing. The only thing I want to talk about is what I'm about to do. So I'm going to try to drive this conversation in a direction towards being able to talk about what I want to be doing, which is this thing in clay, but you got to wait till the end. So, yeah.
From what I know about your work and from what I've seen about your work, and also, being candid here, Erik was my teacher at BCC, where I learned a lot of what I know about sculpture from...
But now you're my friend.
Well, now we're friends, yes. Thanks. So what I've seen from the progression of your work is it seems like when you were in college, when you were learning your trade a little bit more, you had a lot of these really fun, weird kind of things where you were doing lots of face sculptures and large ears that moan when you put a big Q-tip in them, and and kind of almost bizarre things. And then it seems like your work, it always had a little bit of a classical element to it, but you went more and more into these classical, more academic feeling sculptures where you were working with models and the figure and scaling things down and really honing the detail of your skill.
That's a problem that happens. I'm very lucky to have spent the past 20 or so years working with college-age students. I'm forever envious of the category of artist called emerging artist. Emerging artists are the artists that get invited to parties. Like that's absolutely true. And then at some point in your career, you become a mid-career artist. And nobody wants to be a mid-career artist. It's like the most boring title ever, And then later on, you get some kind of master title or something like that. But I'm not there. I'm squarely stuck in mid-career artist. But I very much enjoy the energy of people that I work with because I think that young people are infinitely more creative. I think old people are also much more creative, but those mid-career ones who are very much stuck in their technique and classically oriented things and whatnot, you lose a little bit of something in a certain way. The irony is that when you're young, you have all of these wild, crazy ideas, but you don't have the technical proficiency in order to actualize them. And as you work on your technical proficiency, you're not as creative. And so I'm fighting with that in my own kind of work. Can we actually bump a couple of slides? Yeah. So, yeah, I actually want to go to the next one. So there was a point when Devin's talking about when I first met Devin, 15 years ago, maybe?
Don't say that.
A bunch of years back when I first, I was doing a bunch of weird, crazy stuff. I was pretty unencumbered in my life. I didn't need to hustle as a sculptor in the same ways that I do now because I have a brood of children and a house and all of these kinds of things that I have to pay for and whatnot. So you have to hustle and you got to get commissions and you got to work and things like that. So I was just making and doing whatever I wanted, and I was getting good results out of it. I was getting into shows and I was doing things and whatnot. Maybe if you want to go back, oh yeah, you can show that one. That sculpture's called Octopus Attack, the allegory of my credit card debt. So maybe some of you who have 8 bills, you pay 2 bills off, you think you're ahead, you're like, yeah, I'm totally winning, and just smack, smack, smack. 6 more hit you. And it's very much kind of about this sort of that moment when that guy who looks strangely like me kind of comes to the realization that I'm kind of losing this battle. There's a realization, and I borrow that from a bunch of classical sort of things about trying to capture that pinnacle moment. And a lot of people probably know this thing. I made things like this, and so as an artist, I was making more interesting, things that I was considering to be more interesting and bolder, very pop oriented, and they were getting bigger and bigger. If any of you who remember the giant squid, the tentacles were 22 feet long. So, the body of the thing was probably like 8 feet plus those 22 feet. So it was a really large thing. It still is, it's in my studio. but yeah, you could kind of pop a 400 a couple, And then over time, you start making big things and you start getting commissions. And so I've been very fortunate to have received a number of big commissions, which of course, pays for your studio, does all these kinds of things that artists needed to do and whatnot. But it's not your ideas anymore. So when people commission you to make a work of art, they bring their ideas and they want you to put your spin, your take, your technique, and whatever on it. So artistically, as an artist, I have a bunch of things that are sort of signatures of mine. I borrow extensively from history, whether it's my own history, art history, mythology. I borrow extensively. The fancy art word is appropriation. I like to appropriate things. I have a very strong focus on figuration, mostly human figuration, but not entirely on figuration. I have a strong focus on anatomy, and most people know me as an anatomy guy, and anybody who's ever taken one of my classes knows just how much I obsess over anatomy. But the really kind of big one that brings it all together is I see myself as a storyteller. I see myself more as a three-dimensional illustrator sometimes than a fine artist, I think. And so, when you put all that together, that runs through all my work, whether it's my work or it's commissioned work. But the difference with commissioned work is that with commissioned work, someone else is bringing the story. So you can dig in on it and you can be like, yeah, I'm going to, all the other things, I'm going to appropriate things. I'm going to focus on anatomy and figuration and, classically oriented composition and all these different kinds of things, but still they're driving the story. And so this is, some of you might know this is Elizabeth Tabor. She's the founder of Tabor Academy in Marion. And this is her looking at one of the 5 buildings that she made, and then the 5 buildings are all on the in relief on the curved panel on the back. And that's life size. So what ended up happening over time is that I received a bunch of commissions, and I ended up working larger and larger on other people's work. You're still loving it and enjoying it very much, but as a result, in my own studio, my own personal work started, as some of you are sort of passing that little guy around, started getting smaller and smaller. So this is Daedalus. That's the guy who's moving around. Oh yeah. Oh, maybe do you want me to do that? Yeah, I don't know. Anybody else? Yeah.
I went through the room, yeah.
We're gonna put it right down there. So my own personal work started getting sort of smaller and smaller as a result, and so other works. This is Prometheus up here and Pandora. Oh, this is Theseus and the Minotaur. These all moved from larger life-size pieces to third-scale figures because I'm sort of funding all of this work by myself. Even though I sell some of it out of my studio, it's not what pays the bills, and so yeah, that's kind of.
A lot of, and you were talking maybe appropriation or inspiration. Greek mythology, the classical, Greek and Roman sculptures that you have here. I know you work a lot with models. When you're starting a piece like this, I've asked this question to some other artists. When you're starting, are you starting with the model and seeing what happens and then giving it a title and a meaning afterwards? Or are you going at it with a story already in your head, and then you're trying to answer the question of how you're going to portray that?
Yeah, no, that's a great observation. It's a little bit of both. So anybody who follows my Instagram or something like that, I'm pretty well known for all of the live model work. And the reason why I say I do weekly gesture sketches, that's not true. I don't do them every week. That's kind of ridiculous. And actually, I've been on a little bit of hiatus. It sort of kind of ebbs and flows. But over the summer, I'll do several of them and whatnot. Whenever I have models in, I always work at this smaller scale, which is exactly 1/6. So everything is super math oriented in my studio. When I say a 1/6 scale figure, it scales down and measures to exactly 1/6 or a third or half or whatever. But I always work at that smaller 1/6 scale when I'm working with models, because that's where I'm mining. I'm mining for inspiration. I'm looking for things. So I think there might be, I saw somewhere, there's a smaller version of this that was a gesture sketch that I did with a model, and to me it felt like Pandora, and then that model came back to my studio and we worked on this 3rd scale version. But the reality is that for me, I actually think that this 3rd scale version is actually a maquette for a life-size one that I haven't had the opportunity to make yet. So it's kind of like how I see things.
It's almost like when the difference between drawing with pencil and paper versus clay. If you start with a quick thumbnail, that then turns into a sketch, then turns into a drawing, then turns to a painting, right? You have those steps that go forward. With you're working with clay, so you do this small one, and then it gets a little bit bigger, and then it gets more detailed.
It's funny, I get that all the time. I call that a sketch. So I think that we tend to associate sketch with being with being something that's like pencil on paper, but a sketch is like a quick thing to kind of get something down. I think that writers might sketch out their ideas on Post-it notes. So it's going to be different people how they're going to kind of do that. So for me, I sketch in clay, and then and you can see that the gesture sketches they're rougher, they're faster, they have that more kind of like quick and immediate kind of quality, which I think is their strength. And one of the things when I go up in scale each time, so even like that big sculpture of Elizabeth Tabor that we saw, that started as a quick sketch at the 1/6 scale. Then I made a 1/3 scale maquette. That 1/3 scale maquette is what my committee approved. And then we digitally scanned the 1/3 scale maquette, shaved it a 1/4 of an inch off of it, CNC carved it out of foam, and then reapplied clay to the entire surface, and then remodeled that entire surface. And then we made a mold of that, and then that mold got shipped to foundry, and then we poured wax in that mold, and then that wax got a ceramic mold around that, and then we fired that, and the wax melted out, and then we poured metal into it, and then we broke that mold, and then we had a finished sculpture.
So if you lost any of you in that, the process of sculpture, when you're actually sculpting something out of clay, you're building it. Taking it, scanning it, and then turning it into the foam, computer process that now is making what you would do a lot different than how you would have to have done it, 20, 40 years ago. In general, the art form,
most people don't realize this, but famous sculptors like Bernini, they actually had 3D printers also. They were called the 100 assistants that worked in their studio.
Yeah.
And they would do the exact same thing. So historically, sculptors who worked on very large things, they had assistants that did a lot of the grunt work. So me 3D scanning something, that's it's technically just it's just grunt work. Pointing up a sculpture is not art, I'm sorry. It's just fabrication. It's just a technical skill. And for when you work with like these kinds of materials, this is for all of us who are working at sculpture, and whether I'm teaching my classes or I'm talking to other artists, you have to separate out the parts of your process that are the art, the stuff that's here and here, from just the stuff that's, just for me, I get it all the time. People come to my studio and they say like, oh, your molds are like a work of art. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're functional objects that I'm using to make something else. The art is in the design. The art is in the clay work. That's where it's really here, in my opinion.
So right now we have. Are you ready for this? The draft. You want to talk about the draft? I know you want to talk about the draft. So this draft that you have here is. From what I'm seeing, it's being led by an astronaut, and it looks like, I think you and I talked about it briefly. I think you told me the idea before you actually had anything sculpted.
So this draft actually, a couple of things just really quick. I finished up a couple of life-size bronze figures that went to a library up in New Hampshire. It was a big project and it took a long time and it kind of burned me out a little bit. And I said to my wife, no more commissions, I'm done. Of course, but to anybody who has a commission, it's no more commissions until the next commission. That's what it actually really means. But it also means that I'm not actively like trolling the internet, looking at sites, going to cafe and whatnot, like looking for something to it. So I'm not actively seeking something out. And if something falls in my lap, I'm only going to take it if it's something I really want to do. So that's kind of freed me up, and luckily I'm in a kind of place where I'm at in my career where I have a little bit of freedom, and I don't need. It's because I'm pretty much I'm an artist who came up on supporting myself. Like I didn't have any help with anyone. Like there were years when I had to take anything that I could get, and like.
Actually, I think you're reminding me of what you told, I think, your classes way back about how much you charged for your very first piece that you sold. It was out of necessity, wasn't it? That it was the same cost as a part of your car that you
It was
needed.
a radiator. It was
Yeah.
a radiator. Yeah. It was a great story. I was in college. It was in New Haven, and I was part of the 6 College Arts Collaborative, and I carved the stone. And it was good and whatnot. And I put in this show, and I get a call from them asking like, hey, someone wants to buy your stone. And it was a college show, so nothing had like prices on it or anything. And the day before, or like 2 days before, my radiator had blown on my car, and I had taken it to a shop, and I think it was like $437 or something like that. And the woman asked what I wanted, and I said I need $437. And she was like, okay. And they figured out their commission, and I think the first sculpture I ever sold was for $561. It was some totally absurd number that these people paid, and I literally got a check for $437.
And I mean, like looking at that versus where you're at now, where you have you're at a place where you can let things come to you, and you have stability for teaching, and you have this body of work that it's huge and amazing. You don't have to go and hunt for things so much anymore.
But I'm still taking offers.
No.
So how this kind of came about, I every year or so, or every semester, I always take my figure sculpture class to the zoo. We usually go to the Roger Williams Zoo because they have a greater diversity of animals there. And so I did a demo of a little giraffe head because they have to sculpt these animal heads for it's my 3D design class actually. And then in the second half of the day, I did this sculpt of this giraffe just from life. It was like, for whatever reasons, the giraffes were inside the whole day in that enclosure that they have. And I just sat there for like 4 hours and just sculpted this little giraffe from life. And then I came home, and for whatever reason, I just like randomly kind of because all the best ideas always come out of nowhere, right? I just sort of sculpted this. I had this vision of this astronaut leading this thing. Although I'm known for nude figures, if you go through my journals are filled with like astronauts and space people and people with tubes and whatnot. Even when I was a grad student, I was like obsessed with like this idea of tethering things together, and so over time, so I made the thing, and it kind of evolved into this thing right here now. And what it's become now is the sculpture is called The Last Giraffe, and it's my feelings and thoughts about the inevitability of conservation efforts and sustainability efforts. It is a little bit of a doomsday prophecy, I apologize, but it's just how I feel about some of this stuff. And what would it be like if you were that last conservationist and you had one last giraffe? Like, what would you be doing, and what would kind of be the point of kind of all of it? And so the way I've kind of depicted him, he's not really an astronaut as much as he's wearing a hazmat suit in like a toxic environment. And then, if you look closely, the tubes, the giraffe and the individual are both they're sharing the same oxygen source as they kind of just walk through some whatever stark landscape. It's just whatever, It's like The End of the Road, that movie, the book. So that's. But the really cool part, I like it, I believe in it, and I'm interested in it. I'm currently sculpting it. So this is, again, this is actually a 1/12 scale, so that's a little 6-inch figure. This is a 1/12 scale version, and I'm sculpting a 1/4 scale in my studio as a maquette for a life-size version. Do you know how tall a female, a life-size female giraffe is? No, they're 15, an average female is 15 feet tall. Do you know how tall the studios at Hatch Street are? They are 15 feet tall. So you get a little bit of a lean of the head down and it just barely sort of squeaks by. So, yeah. So my plan is I got this, I don't have any pictures of the other one, but the quarter scale is about half built right now. And yeah, I'm just gonna wing it. I think I'm gonna try to crowdfund it, to be honest.
I think that would be a great idea, honestly.
You know where else it would fit?
Oh, hey. A giraffe and a Chihuly side by side? That'd be great. We'll pitch it to the director. So, I mean, when you're making something like that, are you thinking it's going to be bronze in the end?
Yeah, so like if you look at this thesis in the Minotaur, this thing has been shown a bunch of places. People love this thing and whatnot, but for whatever reason, I've never been able to move it. Can you see how it's matte in comparison to? So like that's what bronze sounds like. And there's something about like the metallic surface. You can it's almost like a ceramic glaze. You can almost see like a micron into it. Like there's almost like a translucency that like sits on the surface in a certain way when you look at it. Plastic and paint can't do that. So I always cast everything. Like I have another sculpture of little birds that I just finished that's at my studio. If you come to my studio for Open Studios, November 23rd. So I have another new sculpture. But what you'll see is a resin cast, because that's my artist test. And so, at some point in time, I have to pay the money to get them cast in bronze. And so if I have a buyer in advance, that makes that process much easier. But if not, sometimes they just hang out for a little while they wait. But the problem is that it's harder for me to for me to even show the resin because it doesn't have the same material value as the bronze. So you kind of get yourself. So, but with this, I very much want, like I'm going to cast the quarter scale one because I'm just going to cast it. I'm going to cast that in resin, but I'm going to do that so that I can use whatever kind of abilities I have and muster whatever kind of resources I have to get it cast. I'm hoping that somebody with like a lot of money just thinks like, this is a great idea, and the city of New Bedford just needs a giraffe walking down the road.
I think that's really cool. And I mean, this is something that I think a lot of artists hit a wall with. They have big ideas, but being able to execute it always comes down to, can I afford it? Can I afford the time? Can I afford the energy? Can I afford the effort? Can I afford the materials? And being able to have that idea and to be able to go for it is something really special that a lot of people never get the opportunity to actually do.
Well, I tell even like whenever I've worked with committees on some of the other projects, sometimes you start the project and they're still doing fundraising. Like usually you need the fundraising process is like kind of long and kind of drawn out sometimes. And so when you're starting that kind of process, I've said it multiple times. Once we get the maquette, once we have a visualization of the maquette, your ability to fundraise goes up exponentially. So it's very hard to it's very hard to fundraise for a paragraph, but it's much easier to fundraise for a photograph. So if you have something that is a visualization, that makes it easier. So it's going to be very hard for me to convince somebody that we need to fund this little tiny thing right here in clay. But if I have a quarter scale, the quarter scale giraffe, it's like this tall. It's big, so if I have that and it's cast in resin already and it's kind of painted in that faux bronze finish, somebody can visualize that much better. So I think that's helpful. You mentioned something else that I wanted to speak to, which is just the overall cost. And because this is a panel about sculpture and making things three-dimensional. As somebody who's spent the past 15, actually more, close to 20 years now teaching, 3D design and sculpture classes at the community college, I get a lot of people who come in and have zero 3D experience at all. And what that really kind of comes down to is that 3D is more expensive. So the vast majority of K through 12 education is going to focus on 2D and drawing and painting and things of that nature because it's just less expensive. It's less messy, there's less tools, there's less everything. Most of the time when you do see anything three-dimensional in high schools, it's ceramics because it's a much easier entry point in terms of getting things done. Work like this, most people don't get even anything even remotely close to exposure to this until they get to the college level, and most people it's even after that. So the entry point for 3D in general, let alone bronze sculpture, it's just really prohibitive. I don't have an answer for that. I just want more people to know. That's why people don't do it. So.
Yeah, I can agree with that 100%. I teach a lot of classes with young kids, and frequently, if I'm dealing with a kid for the first time, I'll bring in Model Magic, a very easy air dry clay, and they lose it over that because it's something they've never had the chance to use. And that's on the lower end cost-wise, but it's hard when you have a lot of children and a lot of people that you have to bring this material for. And even oil-based clay, something that might be like a kid's toy when you first are exposed to it, is not something that kids are ever taught can become something that becomes cast or bronze. The process of casting things is an entirely different art form. Well, not entirely different, but it's a big step up that takes so much energy that it's impossible to do with big groups of kids. I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah, and the irony of that is, as somebody who has small children, the amount of exposure that young kids have in pre-K programs to things like Play-Doh, it's almost like 50-50 when kids are little, and then as kids get a little bit older and it gets a little bit more technically challenging and things of that nature, then all of a sudden it goes away because it's too hard, it's too much. The reality is even to make a sculpture like this, you have to have a wire armature on the inside. You got to be working with some needle nose pliers to cut it and bend it and move it around, and then you got to apply clay to it, and then they're cutting their fingers and all this kind of stuff and whatnot. It's just it's just easier. Let's just draw. Yeah.
Well, now you did mention already Open Studios is going to be happening, right? Do you have any big plans for that other than just having your space open? Do you think that you'll have that quarter size done by then?
No.
But you'll be working on it though, right?
Yeah, I'll be working on it. No, some people saw it. I was starting it right at the beginning of when we did the one in May. I had just kind of started it. And so it's a fresh idea. I haven't done as much in this as one because I've been trying to finish that other sculpture. And of course, I work in academia also, so I'm on a semester schedule and I'm doing things like that. But so I also had it would kind of come down to kind of interest, I think. So I'd love to hear something. In the past, for a long time. So many of you probably know Hatch Street Open Studios and some of those kinds of things. They're really vibrant and really alive lately, so you should absolutely go. But there were a number of years where it was kind of getting a little bit stale and a little bit bored, and so there weren't as many people. And there was one year, I said to my wife, I was like, I don't want to do this thing. I wish I could just hire a model and just model clay while I'm doing Open Studios. And my wife said, that's a great idea. Why don't we do that? And so this was before pandemic, a few years before pandemic, when Open Studios wasn't at its as robust as it is now. We hired a model, we put a curtain across our door, we put a little sign out that said, live figure modeling demonstration, nude model, all are welcome. And people loved it. And we did it for a number of years, but I haven't done it recently because, for whatever reasons. But I wouldn't mind getting back to that, but it'd be whether or not.
I want to say, so I also have a studio at Hatch Street Studios, and I want to say that the year that you did that, I had 800 people come through my room alone, and I'm several floors below you, so I can only imagine what numbers you had that year. It was a good year.
My favorite one was right in the beginning. We had no idea. We were like, how's this gonna fly? Is this appeal, And right in the beginning, when I was just getting started, this dad comes in with his daughter, and she's like 10, 12, I don't know, I can't tell. She's like 10, maybe 10 years old and whatnot. And the dad is like, he's obsessed with what I'm doing. So he like walks right by the model, and he's like all like up and like what I'm doing, like asking me a million questions. And the little girl, she walks right up to the model stand. She looks up and she's, so does he give you breaks? What's it like? Can you breathe? Can you just like this 20 set of questions and whatnot, and it was just all kind of just completely normal. And like after that, we did it for a number of years and whatnot. But we're thinking about bringing that back. But I don't know.
I think you should. Great. All right, so I want to open this up because I'm sure you'll get some. Any questions for Erik about his work, the stuff he does, the process, any of that stuff? Oh, all right.
Hi. So you said at the beginning something about the art not being about the process. So I guess I'm going to push back a little bit and say that I really feel like a lot of 3D work is like the art and the process go together. So I found it very interesting that you don't feel that way.
No, I didn't mean it. I maybe didn't mean it that way. I've actually been engaged in a conversation right now because of what's been going on with AI and whatnot. I have these constant questions about whether or not sculpture is a noun or a verb. And that was something we were talking about earlier before the thing. Is sculpture the act of making the sculpture, or is sculpture the remnant, of the action? And I think that's an old art question. That's definitely an old art question. What I was talking about the parts of the process that are the creative art and design parts that come from here and here versus the fabrication. So in my area, there's a lot of fabrication. So there's parts when you're not being an artist, you're being a technician. So for example, like everything we do in our studios is an art. I know we can push back on this in different ways. Like there's a lot of people who think that walking down the street is art. But as somebody who's dedicated my life to art, I don't accept that walking down the street is art. Sometimes in my studio, I take the trash out. I'm not being an artist when I'm taking the trash out and whatnot. And I think that for me, when I'm modeling clay, when I'm doing those parts of the process, that's where the art is. When I have to stop and I'm just sitting there coating it with goop, like with layers of rubber, building that up, I don't consider that mold making activity to be a creative process. It's just, it's a fabrication process. So when if I'm welding an armature for something, I don't see that as the art if I'm just sort of following a design plan that I did. Maybe making the design plan was the art. That's the separation, I think. You mean? Yeah. Yeah.
It's also a part of your sculpture.
Yeah, figures. Whether we're talking about, I was teaching my drawing class today, and we're drawing. I I have these like 3 boxes like this up on top of like our countertop, the red countertop, by the way. I got 3 boxes sort of stacked up there, and I got the model sitting all the way up on the top, and I got all the students sitting down, looking up at this crazy like perspective thing and whatnot. And the whole process is about being able to integrate the figure with the boxes so that the figure, like I'm integrated. It's pretty artsy. Yeah, if I was to draw me right now sitting in this chair, I wouldn't just draw me floating in the ether, like the integration with this as well. And I think that when we're making sculptures, whether we're making a giraffe walking down the street or like, we're all integrated within our environment, and we can't kind of separate that out. So I frequently try to like treat, they used to call it as a category, sculpture with base. To kind of imply something kind of different, but I try to treat them as a single integrated unit. So as a designer, when I'm like up here, I'm looking at this like as an entire form rather than just the figure and be like, oh, it'd be nice if he was sitting on a box. Yeah. And the box is part of the story because Prometheus was chained to a rock, and that's part of his story.
And I would also say that does heavily depend on the materials as well. If we're looking at stone sculptures, there's just parts of the human body that aren't as sturdy. Ankles would break, things like that. So you'd see a tree stump or something like that near the bottom of the feet, but that was more out of necessity. Where you're working with clay, it's a little bit more malleable, and you have a bit more structure to play with because you can stick steel pipes inside that thing. But if it was stone or something that would be more fragile, you'd have to probably approach it a little bit differently.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely like all of us here who work 3-dimensionally. There are technical issues that have to do with making stuff that stands up. If you have, that's the beauty of drawing. You can draw anything. Like if I want a bridge, all I have to do is just draw one single straight line, and I could stick a person on it, and it works fine. If you actually need to span a space and put a figure on top of it, you got to make sure it's structural. That a lot of what's kind of going on in here. If this is all cast in bronze, this becomes additional structural support so that the giraffe doesn't fall over. So there's an added technical element. But if I didn't say that, nobody would notice that. But it's in there, and you got to be thinking about all of that. So,
cool. Yeah. All right. Any more questions from the crowd? All right. Anything besides Hatch Street Studios coming up that you want to plug before we end the night?
No.
All right.
I think I have a few things going out to a couple of shows, but they're not around here, so they're not relevant.
All right. Well, Erik, thank you very much. A round of applause for Erik, please. And that's going to bring us to our final part of the show tonight. So thank everybody for coming out tonight. I appreciate that you all showed up and helped support the artist. We're now going to have our afterglow. Our afterglow is us being able to walk around, mix, mingle, talk about the sculptures here. And a lot of the things that you saw today were for sale. If you do purchase a piece, please let one of us know. If you're going to purchase a piece, it's between you and the artist. We have nothing to do with that, but we do want to keep tally of that just so that we know how successful the art nights are being. And if somebody does actually sell a piece, we ring the cowbell, that way everyone knows it. So, the last page of your brochure here is going to have 2 QR codes on there. One for subscribing to the New Bedford Light newsletter, and one for helping the light keep on shining. That's going to be for helping to donate and helping to keep nights like this alive. Thank you guys all for coming out. I hope you have a great night. We'll see you next time.